So, um, because most of you are not from Rotterdam, right? Or no, I think that most of you also don't know a lot about the locations that I will be talking about, or that we will see this afternoon. So this is meant as an introduction to the whole topic of affordable housing in Rotterdam. And that is especially relevant, I think, because social housing was always in the whole of the 20th century was like the most essential thing of Dutch architecture. It was what the Netherlands were sort of famous for abroad, and it was also the topic that architects were most involved in. So the whole of the modernist movement made the social housing to the pinnacle of their designs, and it's been like that for decades. So the situation that we are now in is the more estranging because of it. So how did this crisis come about, and what happened that we sort of lost this avant-garde position in social housing? But continuing on Tessa's introduction, I think we should also, during this first days, think about the meaning of the word crisis, this housing crisis, and who actually came up with that word, and how valuable is it actually? Because I think the words that are being used and that we repeat all the time actually also say something about the politics behind these social housing issues. For instance, the whole idea of a housing career. This is something that comes up all the time. Like people have to be able to make a housing career. Like you go from step to a bigger house, to an even larger house, to a more expensive house, and then you end up in, well, one of those houses from the 30s that your parents live in, or my house, and then you're at the top of the career. This is actually a very strange concept. This, huh?
End up in a coffin.
Yeah, and after that, your career ends in a coffin. It's a little tiny house.
It's a Kurokawa pod.
Yeah. Well, but I think that this whole idea of the career, but also of the crisis and of the 1 million houses needed, I would be suspicious, because this comes from the building world, from the builders, from the project developers, and they have raised the numbers of houses to create a sort of urgency to build houses, and preferably greenfield building.
They should be sponsoring our course, because
exactly.
we're creating exactly that expectation that there's a huge crisis.
Well, maybe not, because also Tessa pointed towards the possibility of using existing spaces in a better way, so you don't actually need to build greenfield style. And I think in the words that we use, and also the sort of the acceptance of the fact that we all need to buy a house. Well, when I was 30-something, I also succumbed to this idea. But before, there's a lot of advantages actually to renting. But the whole, it's not propaganda, but the advertisement of the building world, of course, wants us to believe that we should buy something, and this is leading to this crisis, and therefore, so I think we should be aware of those kind of underlying mechanisms.
In 1929, just before the crisis, financial crash in New York City, a townhouse in New York, in the 20s, of course, a townhouse in mid-New York, Upper East Side, cost $1 million. It took till 1990 to get back up to $1 million for a townhouse.
Wow.
So
yeah.
You know what price you buy, but you don't know what price you sell.
But usually, if you look over the last decades, it goes up. This is it's a business model. It's like none of the. Yeah, yeah.
That's what people say. Are you one of those believers that COVID is actually intentional?
Well, Nana de Rue, who is the architect of Powerhouse, always says, like, your house is making more money than you do yourself with working. So, and for a lot of people, that actually is the case. Also for me, by the way. So I just want to take you through a small series of what I would say the highlights of the social housing, but connected to different situations of the development of Rotterdam and the politics behind it. Because, of course, planned housing is always has something to do with politics. So the first moment is this one at the end of the 19th century, when the urbanization of Rotterdam really took off, when the harbor was being enlarged in an incredible way, when all these basins were dug out, and in the middle of these basins there was the housing that we'll also see in the afternoon. We're going to the south of Rotterdam, and all this workers' housing was built here, not by the municipality, but by, you would say, market parties, small contractors who would buy a small plot and then build 5 or 6 houses, sold them, and then started somewhere else. And they did this in a very rash way, very quickly, because, of course, there were a lot of houses necessary.
Can I say something about the previous picture?
Of course.
These bottom 2 streets, that's the Tweebosbuurt.
Oh, these two. This is the Tweebosbuurt, and this is a place where we're going in the afternoon, where there's a huge controversy.
Yeah, it is south. And Tweebosbuurt is op zuid. And this house specifically is the house of Mevrouw Pelger, and she is kind of the signpost resident of the Tweebosbuurt.
Really?
And it's the oldest building in the street, and also the only facade
point to that
that will
again?
be changed.
Point to that again?
Yeah, it's this one for the picture. And yeah, in the plans right now, they want to demolish everything, but save the facade and move it 4 meters because it's valuable. And they want to save the prettiness of the building, but not the building and the residents inside.
But what happened to this area now that we see it empty? What happened to it?
I think that's
What
the rest
went
of
on
the story.
That's the next story.
Yeah.
Well, what happened next to it? Yeah, of course.
Sorry, one more question.
Yeah.
Where exactly is this?
Oh, where we are now. If you look at the very top of the image, you see this small tower. That's the Lauwerskerk in the center of the city. So you see the river running through the side, and then you see this island, which is Noordereiland. So this is all south of the river,
Okay.
where you have now you have Katendrecht, Kop van Zuid, and this is Afrikaanderplein. So yeah, I forgot to. Hè?
Africa Plain? Yeah.
Afrikander.
Where is that?
It's here. It's right here.
So, meaning that a lot of immigration from Africa
No.
moved there, or
No, not at all.
what
No,
does it
the
mean,
whole
Afrikaner?
Afrikaner means exactly what you think, the Afrikaners from South Africa. But there were a lot of, the Boers War, that was at that time. So the streets were all named after sort of heroes from the... yeah, so you have the Paul Krugerlaan. And yeah, it still exists. It's,
Simon.
I'm really surprised that there was not an uprising there. Oh, zit er wel een pointer? Nou, daar kom je nu mee. Nee. Oh, great. Yeah, it is very interesting.
Simon,
Huh?
you
Yeah,
can be at home.
yeah. But also, the twee...
Simon is descending from Afrikaners, from...
Yeah. And the Tweebosbuurt, actually Tweebos is also a word coming from South Africa. Eh? It's an area in, I don't know, near Cape Town or Joburg or some Tweebos. It's part of this Afrikanerwijk, so it's very, not very woke at all.
There were factories there before.
No, there was nothing there before. There was a polder. So it was just, you mean on the...
Yeah, I saw a smokestack there. I'm just curious if that factory...
We'll never get past the first
this
slide.
one.
This train station.
Yeah, well...
Train station.
Yeah, this is the whole emplacement, which is the area for the trains where they would stop. And then you see what is also very interesting for urban planning, you see all these lines going here. And that is all the rails for the trains. So all the streets still have this sort of shape that actually comes from the trains. And then this is all warehouses with the ships coming in here, Rijnhaven, Maashaven. And this is, it's not a factory, it's when you have a polder, you have een gemaal. Ja, maar ik weet niet wat het in het Engels is. Where a pump station. Because this was a polder and it needed to be leveled, the water. So a mix between industrial and workers' housing. And that was this mix was very typical.
How does the polder work? They pump the water, then put it in somewhere else? They pump it out and then put it...
Yeah, the polder is basically, you have a very low land, you put a dike around it, you pump the water out using mills or pump stations, and the water goes into the river, takes it to the sea. Huh? Yeah.
101, yeah. Water works. Maybe that's a good title, water works.
So this is how it filled up, basically. So house, street before street, and the municipality just made the streets and sold the plots to the different builders, and then the whole of the area filled up.
But you call yourselves a polder society, so it's more than a pumping station.
A polder is, well, I would say the polder society comes from the negotiation that is necessary within a polder. Because it is always necessary to negotiate the level and who does what, who pays what. So these are the oldest cooperatives in Holland, I would say, the polder. Yeah, and that's where the polder model comes from. Then that is when the word was coined. But actually, I think this mentality, I'm beginning to see it in history further and further back.
This is about reclaiming land, and we've done that for over a century.
Over a century, over 10 centuries. Yeah. So the first, no, even more.
On a bigger scale.
Yeah, for 2,000 years, and on well, especially in this area, most polders date from the Middle Ages, from around 1000. So this is just to show you the turmoil that was part and parcel of this harbor extension. It was like, I think it is a kind of urbanization phase that we now only know from poor countries, and it has a lot of similarities to global south conditions, actually, like lots of migrants coming in, lots of poor people, lack of everything. And also a kind of brutality, like you have I think Rotterdam was before the war something like Delft or Amsterdam, but it was kind of brutal that they needed a train for the harbor, so they just cut it through, and they were not very careful with their city at all. They just made it into an efficient machine, so the whole city became one big machine. And it was built for efficiency, for economy, not so much for quality of environment or living. And that is also clear when you see this picture. At a bad day, you would have this kind of situations like this is a 19th century neighborhood with all you see all the building blocks. And then this is the warehouses, the docks, where the big ship come in from all over the world. And this international orientation, has always been very clear in Rotterdam. Like, this is all beginning of the 20th century, when you had, first of all these immigrants coming from all over Europe, many from Russia, Ukraine, the Balkans, coming to Antwerp or Rotterdam to move to the New World, to America, but many of them actually stayed and hung around and stayed in Rotterdam. And like in Katendrecht, you have the first Chinese community developing from beginning of the 20th century. And this is if anyone who knows here knows Angelo Betti, the famous pizzeria. He's still here. And I think I think this was his granddad. And now he's not into ice cream, but in pizzas. Huh? They still have ice cream, true. But the housing circumstances in that period were far from good. Actually, they were kind of miserable. And, it was like this. People living with these big families that Tessa showed in a basement, or they would live in streets, but they had no plumbing, no sanitation. So it's all these familiar problems. But, of course, there was also the disadvantage for the higher classes that in these circumstances, diseases would spread really easily. So in the 19th century, after typhus and cholera made a lot of victims, then also the elite became aware of the danger of these kind of places, and they started to organize housing companies to build housing for the poor. And in the second half of the 19th century, there were like 10, 20, 30 of these kind of projects. But it was still by far not enough for all these people who moved in. At around 1900, there were as many people living in Rotterdam as there are now in bigger Rotterdam. So it was a hugely, densely packed city. So this is where, let me see, this is the kind of housing that you had. So these kind of streets that we all love right now. Again, Tweebosbuurt, similar. But then you would have plans like this. So it's back to back. We will also see one project like that this afternoon. You would have two families of 6 or 8 people in one room. And then these two would be the bedrooms. So here you have a sliding door. This is one bedroom for the parents, and this is one for the kids. And they were all I'm not sure how they did that, just stacked on top of each other probably. But then in 1901, this was deemed to be an undesirable situation, and there was the housing law was accepted by national government. And it said that every house has to have some minimum requirements, minimum size. It would have would need to have a room, but also a window, and all these basic things were put in this housing law. But this was the time of socialism, and there were in all big Dutch cities there were socialist aldermen who jumped on this big assignment, on this urgent issue, and they asked also to involve architects. And that is where a lot of the famous architecture of the 10s and 20s actually comes from. Maybe you know this school, the Amsterdam School of Architecture. And this is the Spaarndammer Buurt by architect Michel de Klerk. And these kind of workers' castles were the result of this housing law. Well, in Rotterdam, the
housing law's been changed, modified many, many times.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do abbreviated history of that, researcher.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find that how it has been developing.
The Article 1 said housing wasn't to be done, and then now 1960s housing says now changed into just like snippets.
Yeah, I'm also curious. The right to housing is a part of our grondwet of the Constitution. So when was it put in? Was it already in at that time, or was it put in later? I was also wondering, because everybody now seems to forget that housing is a right. But well, of course, we need to remember that.
It wasn't only about housing. I think it was also about sanitation. So in the
Absolutely,
law said
yeah.
people should wash their hands and go take a shower every day.
Yeah, and also about when a house is not suitable for living anymore.
Yeah.
So all these things are in there. So this is something we might see that just like you had the Amsterdam school in Amsterdam, you had something of a Rotterdam school. There was also, and this is interesting, because of the lack of housing in this period, and because of the First World War that happened, 1914, 1918. In 1915, there was this municipal housing company started. So the municipality actually took upon itself to build housing for workers. And they built like thousands, tens of thousands of houses. They had their own architect, which was J.J.P. Oud. It's one of the very few names that you should remember because it's Oud and Maaskant and Van den Broek. That's like the three architects that built Rotterdam over the years. And this is one of his blocks. And you see this, it is a way to express the idea of mass housing in the facade of the building. So this is not about individual families living here. This is about repetition. And it's also about the collective. So there's one collective, one urban collective living in this block of housing.
By the way, Oud's project of housing in, Stuttgart, where he did prototype housing, Corbusier, the Workbund housing, whatever it was
the
called.
Weissenhofsiedlung.
Yeah, where he made these little houses that were very cubic in a courtyard, cubic and then another courtyard, became the reference point for me to later think of the Empower Shack. If you see the Empower Shack on the other side, it goes also in and out with little shared courtyards to enter the houses. So imagine that social workers' housing from the 1920s can be somehow transgressed and put into, shack upgrade. So this is what we need history for.
There's actually an amazing lack of development sometimes when you look at housing plans from the beginning of the century until now. So minimal, I would say, minimal adaptations. Yeah. But what you also see here is, there is a high ambition in this block. And you can also see it. Oud was also a member of the artist group, the Stijl. And he worked with Theo van Doesburg. And you see these lines, and there were color schemes. And so it was really an ambitious project. And the same goes for this block, the Justus van Effe block, on our scheme for this afternoon. So you see, this is the usual housing, closed blocks. And then in 1922, Michiel Brinkman, this architect, came up with this completely different scheme, which had one bigger block, a bigger collective, but separated in one perimeter block and then inside shorter blocks, and a very typical infrastructure and on the inside of the block, but also collective facilities like a bathhouse and like places to meet, and they were all in the middle of this block. So a complete.
Still see traces of that today because I live in that block.
Oh.
And
beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. But it used to be like 3 or 4 stories high. Yeah, exactly. So no, I live on the other side. But you see 4 stories, and everyone in the bottom floor and the bottom 2 and the top 2, they have 2 front doors. And that's because when they renovated it, the living spaces, as Tessa showed and as you earlier showed, were really small, but too small for standards nowadays. So they connected those living spaces, but because it has monumental status in the Netherlands, they couldn't change the facade, so now everyone has 2 front doors.
So you're also saying that these 2 doors probably belong to the same house?
There's social housing, private housing, and buying or bought houses in there. So this house actually is a bought house that goes all the way to the top. So this one actually has, or it goes like this, and then this one goes also in a sort of weird line.
Yeah.
So this one actually has maybe 4 front doors also on this floor,
Wow.
which is really weird. All these are mostly all social housing, and these are all free sector housing, but the whole block is now owned by a housing corporation.
Yeah.
And where the bathhouse was in the middle is now an art gallery, and everyone has their own shower now.
Well, maybe we can. Yeah, because that was the idea. There was a bathhouse to take baths because no one had a bathroom, of course.
Will we visit this one too?
Yes. Maybe even inside.
I'll call my brother to clean up.
And one of the, I was talking about the infrastructure, like how you would enter these houses, and that was the sort of revolution of this block, that you would have these 2 ground floors with their separate entrances on the ground floor, but then the maisonettes on the upper floors, they would be reached through this gallery. And as you can see, it's a very wide gallery, so it's not only something that is for infrastructure or walking to your room, but it's also for playing, for meeting, it's also for the milkman or the baker who comes with his cart and goes in, usually in the 20s, went into the elevator and then up to the gallery, and he could go through, like was the usance then, go through every door and deliver the milk or the bread. And especially in the 60s, when you know this Team 10 architects like Herzberger and Aldo van Eyck, they looked at this building as a kind of model for how you could make a really dense urban environment, how you could make high-rise also and still have all the coziness and all the intimacy of the old traditional street where people would sit and meet each other, etc. And images like these featured in the lectures of Bakema and Herzberger mostly. Well, this.
No. No, there's no milkman coming up anymore. Yeah, there's still, because of the way the space is, there's still a really big public life, like surrounding those grass fields. But back then, everyone on the ground floor had small gardens, but they decided to move that in a sort of community garden, grass field spaces. So everyone really knows each other quite well, relatively well. And there's a lot of, I want to say parties, but of gatherings happening there.
Yeah, probably not a lot of large families living there anymore.
Actually, in those I don't know how to say that, but those
the ground floor
owned bathhouses, there are still families there.
And then this is probably more similar to the buildings that you saw in Weissenhof-Siedlung. This is a project by Oud also in Rotterdam South, called the Kiefhoek. Another modernist experiment to build workers' housing for large families in a very cheap way. So, and then not only housing, but also with a playground, a little square. There's a school, there's a church. So it's almost like a Kiefhoek. It's in Rotterdam South.
Wow.
Also going there.
It
is sort of intact. This is the thing that happens a lot in Rotterdam. It is recognized that it is very valuable. Well, it was talking about the 90s now. And but it was also technically abominable. So they tore it down and rebuilt it. And this is actually like Tweebelsbuurt. It's happening in a lot of places. So it is there. But it's not authentic, so to speak. There is one house which is called the museum house. I'm not sure if it's open, but you can look. It's very small, so you can have a look inside. And but it looks like this now. So this is a modern picture, row housing, kind of luxurious for the time. If you are a workers' family and you have this living room downstairs and a kitchen, and then you would have 3 bedrooms upstairs. So this is in the 20s. Now I'm going to make this jump to this event of the bombardment, which caused was in May 1940, and it caused a complete rethinking of the city, because the whole center was bombed out. But it was also an occasion for the planners to rethink what should go where, how. So there was a lot of possibility actually to plan. One of the basic things that the planners came up with was to designate the whole center as a city, a heart of the city, with mostly companies, businesses and shops. And then housing would go outside, and also industry would go outside somewhere else. So there was this Siam zoning was put on this city in a very strict way, leading to a center which has mostly shopping and offices and just very limited housing. And then the housing would go into these neighborhoods on the outskirts of the city in a healthy, well, sort of that was the idea, in a spacious, healthy environment with lots of green, good infrastructure, etc., but also close to work, which happens to be in Rotterdam, the industry. So this is an image of Hoogvliet, very close to Shell refinery. So you can ask how healthy that actually was. But so the houses were put where the work was. Another image showing the same thing. So this whole harbor complex was extended hugely up to the Maasvlakte at the sea, and the housing areas would follow. But still, this housing was still for architects very ambitious. Was still the thing that architects talked about. The whole discourse in the architecture world was about housing and about the sort of communities that could come into existence depending on the design. So there was also a huge link between the social democracy of that period, with an open society, with a democratic system, and the open composition of the blocks in these neighborhoods. That's how the discourse actually went. No, this is Pendrecht, one of the models of Pendrecht, and there were. So this was discussed at one of the Siam conferences, and Bakema, Van den Broek, but also Lotte Stambeze. These were all like the most famous architects in the Netherlands. They were working on endless repetitions and models and improvements for Pendrecht, coming up with things like these, the neighborhood unit, also with a very, an idea about society, because how it would work was that you can see it here in one of the realized versions. This is called a stamp, because like a stamp you can repeat it. But it's also meant for people to meet each other, to have a mix of old and young people, families and single people. And that would all be accommodated by like these single houses here and blocks of apartments here. Usually there's also, not in this case, senior citizens living, like these small buildings. So a mix of everything, and they would be connected in this collective space. So the green space was for the collective, where they would meet. So again, this sort of, very close working between architects, housing companies who built this, government, and the political system. I'll just skip this. Then, of course, the sort of homogeneous society from the 50s and 60s changed somewhere in the 60s, very early in the case of Rotterdam, because of a huge migration of harbor workers coming in from Turkey and Morocco, mainly from Turkey in the first phase, as you can see here. And they were moving into the 19th century neighborhoods that I showed before, that were built for harbor workers in the 19th century. These had moved out to the new areas, the modernist areas on the outskirts of the city, and the empty old houses were inhabited by immigrants. So there was a very quick turnover in these neighborhoods in which the immigrant workers became, well, not a majority. Like right now, we will see that they are a majority. Back then, they were almost 5%, and people thought that was way too much. That was also because, just like we have private investors now renting out houses to 4 or 5 students, at that time, these houses were also rented out, but then to 10 or 12 or 20 Turkish workers, which was, of course, a huge burden of sound and to the neighbors.
Where is Linderbaan?
Lijnbaan, which is this is the shopping center that I showed previously. That's Lijnbaan, and this is actually also funny because there was a bus station right next door. So they came from Anatolia, I imagine, and they arrived here at the square. But so this put a pressure on these old neighborhoods where there was also the Dutch people who lived there were the ones who were the poorest and couldn't move to the modernist new areas on the outskirts. So they felt like left behind, and then they had the burden of all these new people coming in, and that led to situations which is very un-Dutch. I don't think, well, it hasn't happened a lot, but this was actually sort of it was in between a race riot and an urban planning riot, you could say. So there was this Turkish pension where a lot of Turkish people were housed. It was stormed and all the windows smashed, all the furniture on the street, and this is the way that people protested against the sort of dilapidation of the deterioration of their neighborhood. And at that moment, so I'm talking about the 70s, there were these guys being chosen in the national government, PvdA, which means the party of the laborers, Social Democratic Party, and they took over. For a very short period in the 70s, we had this progressive government. We like to think of ourselves as a progressive country, but that was actually one of the only times that this party was in power. And they were all very important guys. These three, for the Dutch among you, these will be known names, and for the rest, well, don't bother.
Are they any of them alive?
Marcel van Dam is still alive.
Have you interviewed him?
No.
It would be worthwhile.
Could
Can
be.
we
He has
find
talked. Oh, of course.
Just to show, just
Yeah.
for him to recount the politics of the 70s and what
Yeah.
changed in his mind.
That's actually interesting.
If we could get him, I'll interview him. We'll do a film.
Yeah, he's someone who likes to talk, like all these guys, of course. So, and he was very influential.
The 70s are long forgotten, right?
Yeah,
But
actually,
also
yeah.
here started the notion that every person in the Netherlands should be able to own their own house, right?
Yeah.
So they started that whole idea that you have to own your house, you have to be able to buy a house. So
I'm not sure if that started. I think that was also the confessional parties. They stressed that a lot, and there were all kinds of subsidy. Like we still have the hypotheekrente, like that there is
that's
sort
a
of
big
tax
one.
advantages.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that
Yeah.
definitely is a big thing.
yeah, and that was meant so that to stimulate the ownership of houses by workers.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
then this whole behavioral notion that still exists today that you have
Yeah.
to own a house, otherwise you don't
It's
count.
true.
That's very interesting that
Yeah.
the Social Democrats
Yeah,
started that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're left-leaning now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
they would be for private ownership.
That's how they got their votes in, because they stated not only wealthy to
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Workers gotta
Yeah.
own their house, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Eh? So there's something ambiguous about this whole position of the left-wing parties. There's more ambiguity to come. This quote. Oh yeah, this is the biography of Jan Schever, who was like an alderman in Amsterdam, famous for his urban renewal. He said, "In geouwe hoer kun je niet wonen." I think it was in gelul. You can't live in bullshit, in bullshitting, like talk. We need more than talk. Oh, is that shocking? Maybe it's not the right translation. Jibber jabber. You can't talk in jibber. Live in jibber jabber.
Walk the talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
You have to walk the talk.
For each chapter.
But they did. So they came up with really practical ideas and initiatives that, were very revolutionary at the time. Though not architecturally, because I think the results of the 70s, they amounted to numerous housing units, but the architecture is really, terrible. So this is something, well, not all of it, but the HAT-eenheid is, the HAT-eenheid is something that is a small unit of housing, 35 square meters for one person or two, small household of two. And that was sort of the idea of Marcel van Dam. He was Secretary of Housing, and he said, we need to build a lot of those HAT-eenheden. Because actually, there was a situation kind of similar as now, that for young people there was a complete lack of housing. And hey.
Just at the hat.
Now we will go to the paperclip this afternoon, and it's kind of this. If you talk about the 70s and experiments that have been hugely successful but forgotten, this is one of them. And it's partly because you don't see them. You don't recognize that this is an apartment for. No.
See, this is key.
Yeah, this is key. And in the paperclip also, it looks like one building. You don't see what's in it, but.
Squat building, mainly the revolution buildings, the renovation houses. The municipality would come to you like, okay, we buy the house and then we help you renovate it and you can stay there.
Oh.
And for example, in Amsterdam, but in Rotterdam as well, every building that is owned by Stad, the housing corporation that rents out houses to students, has been a squatted building that has been verhad.
Really?
It's one of the modes of legalizing squats.
I didn't know that. So in existing buildings they would.
You see it, it's everywhere.
Okay. Yeah, but it's difficult to recognize it. But,
maybe you can help us recognize that.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, you live in one. Yeah. Yeah. They're all over the place. And the other thing was that not only new building of these HAT-eenheden, but also the renewal of these old 19th century neighborhoods started in the 70s, which had become so necessary because of the dilapidation and because of the social unrest also that took place there. And the funny thing with urban renewal, I think, is it looks like there was an emphasis on small scale and on participation. So inhabitants would talk with the architects, and they had a huge influence on how their house would be renovated. So there was all small scale and demanded a completely different role of the architect. On the other hand, from the municipality, it was a huge undertaking because there were thousands of housing units which were all bought, like the Carnisse block, that Hermineke mentioned, were all bought from owners to make it into one big project. So it looks small scale, but it is actually also a large scale project, this urban renewal. And I chose this image because actually you can see that the social aspects of this period were first and foremost not the architecture and certainly not the heritage value of these neighborhoods.
And where was the money coming for those big buys of the municipality, of those big renovation projects?
Yeah, I forgot to tell you. The housing companies that were started in the 19th century grew over time were stimulated by the socialist aldermen in the 1920s. They got a huge boost after the Second World War, and were funded partly subsidized by the national government, because they actually undertook this whole role of building volkshuisvesting, which is the people's housing. So they were sort of, you could say, the instrumental organizations for the national government when it came to housing. So for this, millions and millions went into this operation of the urban renewal.
And it's very hard to become one of these government-sponsored today housing corporations. Can one become a portal, a social housing entrepreneur?
That's a good question, because I think there should be more, actually.
Yeah.
Why don't we start? Yeah, but yeah.
Oh, I was just wondering, with the social housing at the beginning of the 19th century, I remember visiting Headship, and a lot of that area in Western Park, Amsterdam was created by Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, working class social housing corporations. When did that all consolidate into like one larger conglomerate?
Well, there has been a huge development over time. What you are describing is the pre-war situation. After the war, there were still what we call the pillars of society, mainly Catholic, and then Protestant, Jewish, not so much, of course. And I think that's about it. But socialist, of course. But it became less and less important, and the next step in this period, it was not important anymore. So, but they started out as very connected to specific groups and identities, but especially in the 90s, I'll get to that, it's completely evaporated. But the whole idea, in the post-war period, you needed to have a good organization, and then you would go to the national government, and they would say, yes, you are approved, or no, you're not approved. Right now, I'm not sure what you need to do. So that would be something to check. Can we start one?
Let's say I'm playing I'm already starting the thing. So let's say you have who went to IHS, right? I'm sorry. Let's say you're part of the alumni network. Could we create an alumni network of 200 people who want to form a social housing corporation? Because in fact, you've been trained all in IHS, and suddenly we want to legitimize making housing for young people. Right?
How about the collaborative housing that they are trying to do now? These small projects, but they're struggling to buy.
Who is trying to do
The housing cooperations. Yeah. No, we're looking at his lecture. It's been taped. Yeah. Well, that is a different. Now, housing corporation is a completely different organization than a housing company. So that makes it really complicated to understand. But the housing cooperations is something that every municipality in the Netherlands now wants to stimulate, because, well, it's something like the project you showed in Zurich. But in Rotterdam it hasn't been successful because of the costs of the land, where these cooperations basically have to compete with market parties, and they cannot compete. You correct me if I'm wrong. You're sitting there as like, if you go like this, I'll shut up.
Can you tell us the different models that are out there? I know we know the developer model, we know the traditional housing corporation model. What other alternatives are there for young people to organize themselves?
Well, we have the CPOs, of course, so we have some projects where, and then you have to upfront look at the conditions, whether there are just market conditions or not, to give land. And also it can be just, we're selling small pieces of land still in Nesselanden, so that goes by, you just have to be in a bowl and your number has to be taken out, so it's a lottery. And we have some CPO projects in South, where we work together. We also have Architect AZ, so we have also some architects who help people who want to buy themselves and help them. We have had klushuizen, so these are existing houses that are in very bad shape, and we could buy them and fix them. So there's some
We should
areas
write down all
that
these
is,
types, yeah.
uh,
But let's say this group here which says identify somewhere in the city, a piece of municipal infrastructure.
yes,
Let's
it
say
could
it's
also be like
a train depot, a thing, and there's air rights over it. And we say we're going to put the housing on top of it with big legs, won't bother you. You can still use the infrastructure below. We're just going to utilize the
yeah,
air.
sometimes we do it as we, I don't know if you go to Carnice, to the area of Zuid-Lijn,
We could.
we could, well anyway, we have a swimming pool there built in an old 50-meter square swimming pool built in an old office of the city, and just after is Carnice, and there is now the first house who is allowed to have an extra floor on top, so also with some subsidy.
Was it a very difficult process to get approval for that?
No, well, we're testing these kind of things to look if people can, expand their house over there. Thanks. Yeah.
How does one come with a proposition and be taken seriously by the city if we identify something?
Yeah, well, we have
An
a
office
website
that
also,
receives-
which ruimte voor woning in Rotterdam. We just rearranged all the websites to have, a second point to be there and to ask, I want some space, or I have some space, what can I do? And we also have, and this has been in discussion in the city, we have our own property which we sell, and it could be houses or other sites. And last years that didn't went that well, irrespective of people who want to buy it and are not a market party, because we had a policy which was, the policy was set by the local government itself that it should be sold
At market rate.
At market, and then when there was this. For example, old school in the neighborhood, and the neighborhood says, oh, I want to buy the school, but also, like, for example, a doctor or dentist, they want to buy it too, because they want to get a practice in there, that's a market thing, because a lot of, especially in the healthcare, so doctors, dentists, for them it's very difficult to get room also in the city now. We have too many people who want to use the space we have. So
it's highly competitive, is what you're saying.
Yes, so we have to be more like a marktmeester,
A market maker.
Market maker as a government, which is how do you do it? So,
Yeah.
market control also as well. We're doing that too.
Well, you could do something like this. You could say,
a lot of instruments.
in policy, you could institute, or maybe if it was approved by the council, you could say 80% of our properties are going to be market made, right? Sold at market. But 20%, 20% we will make experiments.
Yeah, so what we now do is we have a look at the list every year, what we plan to sell, and then we ask around what's in the neighborhood or areas. Is there something which is important to take into account for the program? Maybe not to sell it, but then the government will not, the city will not earn that much, and normally what we earn, we invest in the city. So it's always
Also a political decision. If we would have done this summer school like 3 years ago, it would have been completely different. But now the pressure is so high. But do you think it would be possible for us to get like an insight into what properties does the municipality own and what do they want to sell?
Vers beton, and it just... Yes, they did a research in what has been sold and to whom.
I know, and this is by the person who's coming to give a lecture later this week, Stefan Enne. But I'm interested in what do you still own?
Because we're interested to make propositions to you and buy and enter the market.
There are nice articles on Facebook about it. You get the old school, but then the CPO with only private need to buy, they didn't stand a chance.
No,
they didn't stand a chance.
No, because they didn't offer enough. But that is what we know. But now we would like to know not what has been sold and has been done, but what it will still be sold, And how could we develop ideas for those kind of buildings?
But maybe we
Not
can
for the
do-
schools.
No,
They're gonna-
maybe because those CPOs,
Yeah?
because those CPOs can't pay that upfront money, which is so costly, maybe they can give it 30 years later back to the city at the new market price, and the city gets all that advantage, let's say. So maybe there's a way.
Is there a website that the city has of all vacant land or land property that they own, from libraries to municipal government buildings to?
I wish. I haven't been able to find it.
There's been small,
like 80 to 150 buildings which are still owned by the municipality, not used in the way as you would like them to.
But imagine that wonderful, a city doesn't know how to make more houses, doesn't want to really do it themselves, but knows the value of keeping properties because they know that city owns property, and then they say, I will let the rent roll go for 30 years to these young people who will organize the build
But they
space.
represent the entire city, not only the.
Yes, so they're for everybody.
Yeah.
But
You can
and all
No,
the
no.
policy has been, and all the policy on living has been, everything of the
Is solidified.
bestemmingsplan is or whatever, it always goes through the city council. So they're the ones elected by us to
No. We would have to make a proposition that shows the added value of doing a different development.
Well, I think what is really important is what we mean by value. And I think in the city, value is not just dollar sign or euro sign, whatever. I think value is also culture, value is also quality of life, value is also potentially sports or ecology, and we see today with
Health.
ecological condition, maybe how much land can absorb water or all sorts of different value. So I think that the city has the power to define what is value. I think right now one of the problem is value is mostly based on economic or pure economic or abstract economic.
Well, if you look at the
I
just presents it's there too. But for example, at the Phoenix factory, we had two buildings. One we have housing on top by Highland, and we have cultural program with courtyards in it. The next one was planned also to use for housing, but we sold it to Dromedar who's making a museum in it. And at that time we chose to skip the housing over there because we thought that was better for that neighborhood. When we now sell schools, we think that does this area also need more houses, because then we sell it with a transformation to houses. So somebody has to put a step in to make houses out of it. Well, and these are all different kind of things. But if you need more information, just make some questions maybe you want to ask. And
Well, fantastic would have been to
That's
make a
great.
museum and above artists' ateliers or something, So it's still both, or
But is it necessary to sell it?
that's a good question.
Also with the Zurich model, I saw a presentation at the Arsenal in the Architectural Biennial that talks about collective debt, the idea of debt as a communal thing for creating housing as sort versus, the individual is here about the individual debt. And my question would be, how and are there any, public banks like a credit union or a Dutch federalized system that gives loans out at a condition that they know, it's not a monetary thing, but an institutional place that people
It used to be Workers' Party, workers' unions, used to have those.
The thing with cooperatives now is that you can't find financing in the Netherlands, so you go to a German bank to finance your housing.
Yeah.
So in the Netherlands,
it's a risk assessment type thing because they can't take it as collateral.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah.
I think if you talk about the housing, the obstacles that there are, I think the most crucial decisions need to be, or education needs to be made in the financial world. It's like with these housing corporations, the main obstacle is that these corporations cannot get a mortgage from the bank in the Netherlands because they don't know how to do that with a group, because they are not used to it, because why should they? I don't know exactly the reason why. When you go to Germany, it's, common. It is like you can get a mortgage with a group. They are used to that. The same thing is, I think we all need different financial models. For instance, I'm not sure if you heard about this whole new movement about open building, which is actually a follow-up on what Habrake did in the 60s. You make a distinction between the construction and the infill. So the construction is a longer period, like 100 years, and then the infill is for 30 years. So that means that you should also have different mortgages, a collective mortgage for the frame, for the construction, and an individual mortgage for your house. So, and that also asks for new financial products which don't exist yet. I just see you nodding and talking all the time. But these are things that I know to be true.
Yeah, but it's way more complicated. There's a background to it, there's policy measurements.
Oh, by the way, we're not.
Way more
This is a
stakeholders
school,
involved.
right? So this isn't the real world. I mean, Fred will talk more about that. Here we are experimental labs, so we can dream. So the idea is, how do we jump all of those obstacles to create these idealized models, which later may not work, but someone might be able to figure them out.
But our aim is to present it to them.
But they'll have legal departments and say, but you tweak it here, and you tweak it there. We need a lawyer.
But we need creativeness, not only in the design, but especially also in organization and financial models. And this is not our specialty, so you have a lot of work to do.
That's why the history is interesting. So.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
But I have to say, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but it's such a delight to see Crimson do this historical analysis, and then we realize again, we don't know our history.
I noticed that a lot of people, because I was in this TV program a few months ago about housing, and then a lot of people suddenly started to email me, like basically your age, in between 25, 35, something like that. Like, what can we do? How can we find housing? And I said, well, there's this and this, and there are all these possibilities that we are now talking about. They had never heard of it. And also the right to housing that is in the Constitution. Nobody had ever heard of that. So, yeah, I do think it is little known that this situation is not normal that we're in.
So it starts with exchanging knowledge. So that's exactly what we have to do.
Exactly.
And thinking out of the box, and not only, of course, we know there are laws and rules and everything, and we have to also know them, but still with this exchange, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
You can question them and question it.
Yeah. You wanted to say something?
No, I'll ask it.
Yeah.
Asking the right question is more valuable than trying to find the solution.
Okay, but still.
When you're a student, you have to use that answer.
Yeah, no, this is all in the range of experiments and new inventions from the 70s. So handeenheden, urban renewal, stadsvernieuwing, but also the squatter movement, of course, started in the beginning of the 70s, end of the 60s. And this is still about the stadsvernieuwing. Oh, I'm way ahead of myself. This is still the 70s. This is showing the kind of participation and how the inhabitants organized themselves with the guidance of an architect, I should say, in action groups. And they said, can you live here, the Oude Westen? No, you can't. And these were all movements and mostly guided towards the improvement of the interiors. So these were houses with where everything was broken, basically, where there were no bathrooms and there were shared toilets. So these kind of streets. And then basically what they did was tear down everything but the construction and then rearrange everything inside. But also in the 70s, just to show you how there was also an architecture movement still working in social housing, is this building by Karel Weber, the famous enfant terrible of Dutch architecture. The paperclip And this is the start of the renewal of the harbor areas. So already in the 70s, because the harbor was moving outwards to the sea, all these old terrains were becoming empty, and the old industries and factories were torn down. And this was a social housing project that was built in 1981. You can see why it's called the paperclip. It was about 500 houses, so a huge project in that time and age. And you can also, see how in the beginning it was like a mastodont in this area. By now the context has completely changed. But this is, so it's not small scale, it's definitely not with participation, but it's more a rationalist approach to use systematic design and repetition in social housing. It has been a very controversial project. We'll see how it's doing now. It was something like a ghetto in the beginning, because it was so isolated also. But now the whole area surrounding it has sort of been redeveloped. I think it's a much more popular place. And it has also been renovated and changed in some ways. This is about the squatting movement. So in the beginning of the 70s, so there was this huge lack of housing for young people, but there was also an idea that to live in a single family house or an apartment was not the ideal of many people. So people wanted to live collectively or with a group or with friends or in an alternative way or in a commune or whatever. And these kind of houses and places were just not available. And there was a huge amount of buildings that was empty at the time. So the squatter movement started from there. They made these, lovely manuals on how to do it, how to squat a building, how to create the right key.
The technique. It's what's that? Break the door down.
Yes. Ja. To kraken is
what we say with
breken.
the great soccer player was this goal scorer is a crack.
Yes, a crack. Yeah,
we can
true.
play some games.
Yeah, crack. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the word comes from the crack of opening the door.
Of course, if you open the door and the sound it makes is a crack. But also very buildings. I'm sure you all know this building, the Hotel New York. In the 80s, it was empty and it was squatted. And at the time, nobody knew what to do with it. But there were parties over there, and some people living in the back of the building. And suddenly, everybody started to look at this place like, what a wonderful place to go to. What a beautiful building, what a view, so it became very popular. And that is, so squatting also, it worked in some way as what we now call with the terrible word placemaking. So it became popular, and it was developed for that reason. And also other buildings. This is the Poortgebouw that we will go see. Also a beautiful building that was part of the harbor extensions of the 19th century. And that you can, they have contracts now, but it used to be a wild squatted building. As you can see, this one of the Kraak Café, so they had all these meetings and also a collective building, collective group living.
Very badly maintained.
Very badly maintained, yes. I don't know who's the owner now.
Well, finally having actions on it, so they...
The owner is the Groene Group, and there are 4 people from The Hague that bought the building a few years ago, I think. And from the 80s until somewhere mid-2000, this was owned by the municipality, and then it was sold. Sadly, the group that lives in the building didn't get the chance to buy the house. That would have been, I think, the best solution. The owners, they bought the building with the hope of evicting the residents, and they have never been able to because they have a really strong contract and a really strong possession of the building. Mm-hmm. yeah, basically the deal is that the inside is maintained by the owner group and the outside by the owner, and that's a classic way of managing a squatted building. And yeah, the owner just is just using kind of destructive maintenance, just waiting out the residents.
There's a history of this. You know, the Bronx is burning. Anyone remember that? The owners of the building lit fire or left the pipes open in the winter.
And in this case now, a few months ago, the municipality forced the owners to maintain the outside by court order because it's the Rijksmonument, it's the national monument.
They should, because our last office before we moved here was also rented from the Groene Groep, and they are really terrible in maintenance of their building. It was a beautiful building on Matteresselaan, and they just let it crumble. It was really terrible. They're really the classic bad guys in rental.
If the city seized the property from the person because it might be deemed a hazard to the rest of the city, you know, and then get it out to the squatters or something like that, because there's sometimes like civil forfeiture basically.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
I don't think the political vibe is correct right now, but I mean the municipality forced the owner to maintain the building. So
that's already courageous, I
think.
think.
Back to forcing the owner to do something to the building.
Well, now we're getting towards the end, but this is something important to know. This is about the housing companies. So we were talking about how they originated in the 19th century, how they developed under socialist rule in the 1920s, how they became huge institutions with state subsidies in the Reconstruction period. But then, as you will remember, 1978, Thatcher in the UK was the start of a huge neoliberal wave, but also of privatization of a lot of state enterprises, and that wave, sort of blew to the Netherlands. And in the beginning of the 90s, the privatization of all the housing companies took place. So there's also a lot of nuance to this, but basically they lost their state subsidy, but got the prize of owning all the houses that they were maintaining. So and they had to behave like sort of normal companies under the
state supervision.
They were privatized, but not completely. So they still have to comply to national government policies, but their exploitation has to be like that of a company.
What do you think they did? They lost the subsidy, got the properties. The properties were social properties, housing. What do you think they did? They moved people to other locations, took the residents out, and then sold it at market price. They were well located, so they could cover the subsidy problem, right? And that became a whole process of how to activate.
It is, of course, this is also, if this was the case, that would be a scandal, but it is a little bit more subtle, but
nuanced.
Yeah.
I know that from Hooggraven and Utrecht because they moved them to Outerkerk or Overkerk or something.
This is also a little bit the scandal of Tweebosbuurt. It's continuing, but in different variations. But this is just to show you, of course, I had some fun in collecting these images, but we, with Crimson, we worked in Hoogvliet, you will remember, and we worked with these two housing corporations.
I met her.
Oh, you met her? She was also the dean of the TU for a while. But these two housing corporation directors were highly controversial, well, not at the time, but after, because this one bought the boat and it overextended, the budget became higher and higher, and they went sort of, well, they didn't went bankrupt, but they had to be saved. And Erik Staal, Vestia, who owns the Tweebosbuurt, he was convicted for fraud. So they were privatized in the beginning of the 90s, started behaving like companies, and they started also to merge together, becoming bigger and bigger. I think Vestia at the at the highest point had like 70,000 housing units in their ownership. But also Rochdale in Amsterdam, they're all kind of flashy companies where the directors were either convicted for fraud or suspected of fraud. So really it went out of hand. And then, unfortunately, the national government also decided that they would be punished. And they had to pay sort of the verhuurdersheffing, which is like an extra tax for people who rent out. So at a certain moment, so this was about 10 years ago, they were not allowed to build anything else but social housing. They were not allowed to do area development anymore, and they had to pay this extra fee. So their means were very, very limited. And partly as a result, you can also see this is the production of social housing in the Netherlands from the 70s until now. So you see that there's this peaks in the 70s, beginning of the 80s. And then there is actually a negative number starting at the end of the last century. This is because a lot of the housing companies, when they were privatized, sold off a part of their stock to have capital to develop new things. I'll just leave this. This is the Bijlmer, one of the biggest social housing developments from the beginning of the 70s in Amsterdam, with our queen at that day, Queen Juliana, and a large part of the social housing was demolished and replaced by single-family houses. That was sort of the standard recipe for renovation of social housing areas in the how do you say that? In the zeros of this century.
It looks like this whole highway goes on the roofs of housing, right?
It should have.
It's below, but imagine if that was like, a greenway on top. That would be very interesting.
It would have been a lot better, I think, because it was a dump at the end. But another thing that was kind of important, also 10 years ago, a lot of things changed. So we had this minister from the Liberal Party, and he said, I am the first minister who has been able to to make a whole ministry disappear. And that was the Ministry of Volkshuisvesting, Ruimtelijke Ordening en Milieu. People's housing, so housing, spatial planning, and the environment. And that has disappeared and being fragmented over different ministries. There is a huge talk now, it might also play a role in the formation of the new government that we will have, that there should be something like a Ministry of Spatial Planning again, because both architects, builders, project developers, left wing, right wing, everybody says that this is something that we are missing now. And also 10 years ago, the anti-squat law. So squatting has been forbidden since that period, though I was just informed by the experts that this is actually less important. It's maybe more symbolic than it sounds, because the living as a human right is still more important than the ownership. So if you move into a building to live there, it's still how do you say that? It's still more important, so they won't evict you. That's basically what you...
It means that you can squat and stay in a building for on average about 3 months instead of 3 days until the police finds out. Because if it would be really illegal, like in Germany, it wouldn't even be possible to open the door and settle, because you would be immediately evicted. While in the Netherlands, when you enter a building and claim housing rights and establish house peace, it means that also the police can't break your house peace. They need a court order to evict you. So in that gray space between the anti-squat law and you have a roof over your head, you have a few months
Okay.
in the middle. But it isn't as easy. I mean, the anti-squat law did destroy the squatting movement in a really major way, but it still exists. But like 5% of what it used to be.
Well, something that we, so you're talking about percentages, and I would also be interested in the numbers of anti-squat people. So we were talking about 6,000 or percentages. Well, I've never seen that research done, but I would be interested in how many people are actually living this way. Well, and then just to finish, because Tessa has already talked about this period, the most recent period. So for Rotterdam, it came a little bit as a surprise, I think, for the last 10 years, suddenly this city has become popular. This amounts to a larger pressure on the housing stock, also more tourists and also more exposure in media, and so there's a complete change of atmosphere actually around this city if you compare it to 10 or 15 years ago. And also the urban culture has changed quite a bit into a more open and more recreation, more attractive environment. If only the fact of the number of terraces and bars that has, I think, exploded in the last 20 years. There used to be only one, that's the Pavilion, and now there's, I don't know, 100. Also, one thing is that the Rotterdam City of Architecture has become quite a household brand in the Netherlands, and lots of people actually visit the city because of the new landmarks like the Market Hall, the Rotterdam, the new station, or most recently had the depot of the Boijmans van Beuningen Museum. So all this adds to completely, almost a different city in a different phase. Important for the housing is the Rotterdam Housing Vision was published or accepted in 2016. Quite controversial also. I think it was published just at the threshold of this new period of the urgency and the pressure rising. One of its controversial points was that there was going to be a demolition of 20,000 social housing units, of which 10,000 in Rotterdam South, with the main reason that the city government perceived the housing stock to be unbalanced and having too many social housing units. Because the percentage of social housing in Rotterdam is way higher than in other Dutch cities. Right now it's still 69%, and according to plan it will become 58%. So, and interesting is also that it has as a goal to have every neighborhood in balance. So that means that per neighborhood, the policy looks at how many social, how many more expensive other classes of housing are there, and according to that, the plans are being drawn up. I'm not sure if you want to say something or. Yeah.
I thought that they decided that there was too much social housing because there were like certain groups of inhabitants that were actually not in need of social housing, like for example students were decided to be not in need of social housing. But I have a question: is this true, or like do you know the groups that were decided upon that were not in need of social housing anymore? Because before they could say like, oh, it's not necessary, they had to. So,
I don't know the answers.
Yeah. Yes,
I don't know.
Well, that is a problem. When you have a lot of social housing, you live in a social house, and the gap is too big to go out of the social house because you earn more or you don't live together. to be what we call the mid-rent, like police officers, teachers, etc. And there is a gap between social housing and the high end. Then people tend to stay in the social units, and then the waiting list for the social units just get higher and higher. So what we need is in finance, in how many people have to spend on housing, and in what you said at the beginning, with the story of your parents, you have to take that all into account to find the right place and the right area and the right price for people to live.
But then you need you need housing stock that is in the middle rent sector, and this is not enough.
No, and we're now when we give plots or we sell plots to developers, then we demand a certain amount of middle rent and also a middle buy, which we say you can't just sell it, after a year with a lot of profits. So you used to have that years and years ago when the housing market was not good too, that you have a cap on how to sell through.
I think
we need those instruments from the 70s again in this area. So and there's the 20 year, 20, 30, 30. For example, Little C. I hope you go there. Little C project.
No, it's not social housing, right?
Partly. There's a big block in that area which is social housing.
Is that the high rise, so to speak?
The green building with the 2 towers.
Yeah.
Oh, but then
we're talking about Little C, right? Yeah.
But then still.
And what is special about Little C?
Why should we go there?
What's special about the Little C?
No, they won the prize for the best architect and the public prize last month. And special about the project is that it has a high density, like 4 FT, so which is quite high. When you're there, it doesn't feel like a lot of houses. It has a beautiful area inside, and it's really communal. So they had a design working group from the people going to live there. They have shared rooftops. So people who live there, they share a rooftop together with each other, and they have WhatsApp groups. So someone said, "Oh, I'd like to give a party this weekend. Oh, it's alright, have fun, just." And the other one said, "Oh, shall we have drinks there on Friday?" And all the neighbors come. And it's a mix of people who have paid like $1 million for their apartment and the people in social housing in that area. And it's just, they just started to live there. Really interesting.
Who's the architect?
Jacob van Spijker. He's a friend of ours, so we could ask him.
Going to the south area, drive right.
Yeah, but I don't know which part is the social housing that because I looked at the houses and they were so expensive.
On the side of the hospital.
Side of the hospital.
On the side of the hospital, the biggest side.
The ugly side.
Yeah, on the back side.
No. They even the small ones. They have because we demand every house in Rotterdam has a balcony or whatever outside area. And so even those have, it's really.
So you think the positive things are they may be it's a mix between upscale and social, number one. But the difference between the upscale and the social, is it 10%, 20% in market price, 15%? What is the difference in price between the two? Or is the social apartment given with special subsidies? Or is it rental units?
It's rental units.
It's rental units. So it's a long-term rental scheme of
But this is developed some years before we were in the current situation. So at that time, a lot of people could buy a new apartment there with a nice price. So
you can see some apartments actually being delivered now and immediately being put back on the commercial market for another sale.
Yeah.
Because they make 20,000, 50,000 over.
See, but not if they're social, there should be a clause
So it's not the social house.
It's a mixed area.
Yeah.
And inspired by New York, so maybe you would recognize some of the design.
Yes, I was about to say that's a Fred's situation. He lives exactly like that in a townhouse with shared roofs.
Yeah.
The style of the architecture is basically New York.
It's Greenwich Village was the main inspiration for.
That's where he lives.
Yeah, we need to speed up a little bit. Yeah, otherwise we don't have time for lunch. But yeah, just two things about this. I think the inventory of what is social housing and affordable housing, also rental from private owners, basically, has been done before the roaring prices. So a lot of it has actually become unaffordable. And that hasn't been taken into account in these neighborhood visions yet. Huh?
We voted for this.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. So 5 years ago, basically this was the demands of the people living within the municipality.
Yeah, but that shows how maybe also policies should be flexible, because this policy is not geared towards the most recent economic developments yet. I was in this workshop on Het Lage Land, and in the woonvisie it said there's too much social housing. We will only build more expensive classes. But if you now look, it's like what Tessa did. What is the offer of affordable housing there? The prices have risen so strongly that there is nothing. So that is, yeah, of course, but things change. That is the dynamics that we talked about.
It's a bit easy, I think, to say that, yeah, there was a referendum and 52% voted in favor of the woonvisie, so now it's the will of the people. The referendum was very controversial, and the vote to come to a referendum was very controversial, and the vote to vote for the woonvisie in the city council was very controversial. And then the fact that in the neighborhoods itself, people think differently than other neighborhoods, because, I mean, if I woon in Hillersberg or the Onward, of course I'm a fan of the woonvisie, but when I live in the neighborhoods that are impacted by the demolition, maybe it's a different story. So I think it's a very easy story to say, hey...
I think he knows that, but he was just being provocative, which is good.
I voted against things like also how you mobilize the people, which really has an effect on, to go to cast their vote.
Yeah.
So apparently they didn't.
Yeah, but then I think the question first to ask is a referendum really the tool to come to a housing, a city-wide referendum to come to a housing policy? Well, maybe we should have street-scale referendums, like, I mean, in the 70s during the Stadsvernieuwing.
Maybe the scale was too big. That is a good point, actually.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to finish, because I'm getting hungry. This is just to show that there is, the development in the last 5 years was demolished or sold 11,000 and new social 9,000. So there is a slow decrease in social housing in the city in 2,000 over the last 5 years.
Wouldn't the public policy be effective instead of demolishing the homes for the renters to sell to them directly first, since they're the first ones occupying it probably for the last 10, 20 years? And like I said, the question earlier, that do these housing corporations or social housing corporations, are they a non-profit? Do they not get taxed for being a social housing corporation? How does that affect them to do policy?
Yeah, they do have tax rebates.
They do have tax rebates?
If they reinvest in housing or something like that, I'm not sure, but I remember from Portal telling me.
True.
Yeah.
And they also sell to renters a lot, but this has caused numerous other problems.
No, but this is clear. It's what I was saying, is that they demolish this because the buildings are in bad condition. So the one law says we need to we need to redo the facades, the windows, the bathrooms, the kitchens, whatever. So this is cheaper just to demolish. So they convince everyone in the building that they'll get a new unit. And while they get the new unit, they go live somewhere else, or there's an arrangement. and then what they do is they now the zoning laws have changed between the 4-story walk-ups of the 50s, and then now they can maximize it, and that's where they get their profit.
Yeah. Yeah, project development is not a very complicated process, we've learned from a project developer. But also what you're just describing is also basically what they're doing in Provoost. So there's about 500 houses, and there will be 300 something coming in return. And of that new number is only 130 something, which is social housing. So it's more diverse, the housing that is being returned. But it's also less, and it's also a lot less affordable. So that's what we'll be going to see this afternoon. Has sparked a huge controversy. There's quite a few. So this is the new plan for Provoost. You can tell that, well.
Now, wait, go back. If this was Barcelona or something, you have a city architect in Rotterdam?
No.
You don't. That doesn't exist. But what is the former in Amsterdam? The former head of the school became the city architect? No. Ties or something, I forget the name.
We don't have the system in Rotterdam.
So, if you had a city architect, he'd be sitting on...
A committee. There's a committee judging every design on its
if this were
quality.
To arrive at that committee, and the committees are very highly esteemed, honorable architects, let's say, they would immediately say, this is not right architecture. Look at the two scales of a city, no kind of fabric development, green spaces, setbacks, weird things, not a good, clear, cityscape, Paris, taking Amsterdam, taking London. So in 2 seconds, any good housing architect would say that would show the problems. Now, they should return it with the whole information back to the developer, say, come back next week with a new scheme. Why doesn't that happen? Why isn't there a checks and balances?
I think I can answer. Because there is no plans yet. This is also the thing. It's just demolishing or emptying buildings and maybe demolishing in the future, and then they have no plans. They're just demolished with no plans.
But this is on the website of Vestia already, yeah?
Yeah, but you don't know, you don't really know it.
No, you're right. You're right. We don't really know if this is what's going to be built, right? And this is all a kind of facade. It's a test. It's what Fred will talk about.
I'm not sure, because I think it is connected to the rest of the, well...
So this might be real, is what...
I accepted it for real, and I think it is also connected to other designs that are part of this area. And frankly speaking, I think these are the kind of projects that are sort of normal in Rotterdam. And the two scales connect to this one of the existing street, and then this is to make some square meters. So this is what you see the project developer spreadsheet is behind this.
No, I got it. But if we all know, is this balcony good for anything? Like, can you put a table there? Can you have a breakfast out there? Can you invite some friends for it? So you start to wonder, what kind of a design are we talking about?
Yeah.
But this should be seen by the committee.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know, so they're going to say, but that's already existing, so I should be able to do it also, right?
Yeah.
But you say times have changed.
I think you're used to the level of the standards of Zurich and Vienna, which is way higher. I have to,
No, but you have the best architects in the world to be on those committees.
Guys, this is the graph of what Tessa already told you. This is the development of the prices of housing. But this is something we all know. This is one of the effects of it. We all know the homeless people, the couch sleepers. This is kind of interesting. People actively looking for a home, which has risen 3 years ago. I'm not sure what the actual numbers are now. But actually looking for a home doesn't mean that you're homeless, of course. So it could be for numerous reasons, for that you're looking for a bigger house or a cheaper house or in a different place or etc. So it doesn't mean that there's like this number of houses that need to be built or that are really lacking. So doesn't say.
I think renting because it's from Wonet. I see, and Wonet is a sort of I don't know how to explain it correctly, but yeah, basically a corporation. And you have to, if you want a building, rent a building from them, you have to go to their website and react on the listings they have there.
Yeah.
And you see the overall population of Rotterdam is about 600,000?
Yeah.
So we're talking about 10%.
Yeah, but Wonet is for the whole Rijnmond area, so that's Vlaardingen, Schiedam, Capelle, Rotterdam. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. This is also interesting because it shows me that there's numbers and then there's numbers, and they never are the same. So the total housing in Rotterdam is a little bit more than 300,000 houses. That could be right. Like it's 2 persons a house in general, on average, that could be right. But then it says social housing, 140,000, which is less than half. So it says 44% of all the housing stock in Rotterdam is social housing. But we learned from the housing vision that it is 69%. So that is a huge difference of 25%. So I don't understand. And it doesn't match. So either we're talking about, it's a mismatch, yeah. And if this is true, then there should be a whole different outcome, of course, of the housing policy. But if the other one is true, then so.
This is a perfect thesis to begin the manifesto. It's the question, it's the research question. There's a mismatch. Where is it?
We hebben een gebiedsatlasuntwikkeling woningvoorraad. Daar staan veel data in. Er staan ook bijvoorbeeld de beschoping. Dat in 2012, 2019 is jaarlijks tussen 0,07 en 0,34% van de totale voorraad gesloopt.
Jaarlijks?
Nee, in de totale periode.
Oh.
Dus ik bedoel, je kan heel erg focussen op wat gesloopt is, maar je kan ook een beetje.
Ja, nee, dat bedoel ik.
So it's a time problem. It's how you measure it in time, or?
No, it's about looking at the right statistics and relating them to the right figures.
De sociale huurgrens is ook geschoten.
De sociale huurgrens is ook geschoten. The social housing is not just, it has compartments. No, if you say social housing, it has, because of the word social has a connotation. But it is about a certain gap of salary, what your income is, in the group that will be able to live there. Everybody here with probably academic degree, this is not where you qualifying for these, and it doesn't say anything about how social you are as an inhabitant. It has everything to do about
your job.
Yes.
But maybe it's also important to say like how the social housing system works. It's just like this. If you have more, or if the house costs more than 720 a month, then it's not social housing anymore. And if it costs under 720 euros a month, then it's social housing, and you can get some money from the government, which is like 300 or 400 euros. So you actually pay like 300 or 400 euros a month for your social house. And then when you earn too much, you have to go and rent a house that is like above 720 a month, and then you suddenly have to pay way more, of course, because you don't get a reduction.
Is that clear? Because actually, I didn't talk about that at all. But so every individual can apply for an individual subsidy for rent subsidy, huursubsidie.
To the national government or to the city?
National government.
The housing ministry.
Ja, is that true? Or is it municipal? Huursubsidie, gaat dat via de gemeente of de over? Belastingdienst. So national.
But only if your rent is lower than 700 something, which is highly.
So it's not on your income, it's your rent unit.
But also your income. So if your income is above a certain limit, which I don't know. Is it?
Yeah, it's pretty high limit. Like,
20,000.
not everybody earns above minimum wage, you know.
Yeah.
So let's say I don't
So it's 30,
I'm an artist,
32.
I don't earn any money, I'm just out of school, I'm just wanting, I get an apartment at 700, can I apply to government?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you have to wait 10 years before you can actually get a social housing number because the waiting lists are super long.
This is something which I was very surprised to read. It's actually not true in Rotterdam.
Really?
If you apply for a social
Usually.
house, it's only 2 years
But the
on
thing is
average.
that you can easily live in Capelle aan de IJssel or Vlaardingen, but if you want to live in Charlotte, the neighborhood where I grew up, yeah, good luck, you need 8-7 years.
Well, they said in Rotterdam, not Rotterdam region.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know how exactly.
Rotterdam.
Yeah, maybe you have to go to Maasluis and then, of course.
But
Okay.
there's lots of choice, but not every choice is a good choice. So,
I think this is also something that I would like to know more about. If
I
it's
mean,
really
also,
how that is
I mean,
possible.
There is this income limit. If you earn below 24,000 euros a year, you can rent houses that are below 620 euros. If you earn between 24,000 and 32,000 a year, you can rent houses between 600 and 750 a month. But this is an arbitrary line that got only established in 2015 when the Passenhuren was established. Because before that there was lots more space. If you earned higher, you could also rent low. If you go lower, you could rent more expensive. So this Passenhuren, which is now considered a normal and a factual thing, is actually
That's one part of the shift, the 68% or the 44.
And
That's
also,
in there.
while you're waiting for
We
these,
need you guys to write this down.
while you're waiting for this 1 or 2 or 10 years, you still need to leave somewhere.
Yes.
Because I was in that situation and I was for 2 months jumping from one friend to another friend because we couldn't find anything.
Exactly.
Can I also ask a question? Because you can also private owners can make housing in social sector, and so then they get this. Like then the government pays a bit that goes to the private owner basically. Do you also know when this started? If this is
No.
old or?
No, I would write it on my research question page.
Actually,
You-
a question links to my question because I used to live in a rental house that is owned by a private owner, but the rent is below 710, so I can get the subsidy from the national government. But my question here is that does this type of housing that can be subsidized by the government consider social housing in these figures or not?
Even though they're private.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
part
good
is-
question.
Because a lot
Yeah.
of students actually lives in this
Yeah.
kind of house.
That's what makes
Would
it.
it be part of it?
Really, yeah.
If it would have been the numbers provided by the government, they would say yes.
Yeah, because it's not about ownership, it's about the price point.
Yeah. I don't know if it's part of the affordable. Yeah.
To say social housing.
Yeah. Usually, my perception of the private rental sector is that it is above this level of 720, but so it's not always.
It depends because
Yeah.
basically you get very small space.
Yeah.
Well, what is a rental? A rental is a percentage of the value of the asset.
Yeah.
Right? Discounted at a mortgage rate that's an average mortgage, a loan rate, right? So that's what the renter says. Well, my house is worth, I don't know, XXX, and I'll get 10% out of it and yearly, right? So he can set that price point based on. So it has a lot to do on the value of the asset. I don't know how good your asset was, where it was located, well maintained, not well maintained, etc.
Yeah.
So he's also declaring his asset at a price to the government as his own asset in his pocket. So the government will tax upon that asset. So it all is a game of what that asset class is.
Yeah.
But Dutch government doesn't get tax from rental income, right? Like
Yeah, they do.
They do?
Yeah, but it's
Then
usually
like
done
that.
by the tenant, though. Like, I'm in the rental property, coming from the state, I have to pay property taxes every year. And that's not added, included into the rent of like 1650. But then, I'm dealing with the difference between the Dutch and American system where, the landlord's supposed to notify me 2 months prior to the end of our lease saying, would you like to continue? Versus they haven't done any of that. Within the renter rules, it's, I guess, a transition from no longer a lease to a month-to-month, right? And then aren't there rules here in the market where it's like the government sets what the inflation value will be for what they can increase it every year from between 2 to 4%? 6? 4.
But that's actually also a new thing. Only during Corona did the government decide that also the private rental sector has a maximum percentage increase.
Right.
Because previously it was always social housing goes up by 0 to 6.5, also depending on your income and other complicated things. But private rent could just say that, hey, 20% more, good luck.
Well, yeah.
But now that's
I
also
don't think
linked
that's the case
to
because before in 2017, my landlord also sent us an email saying that okay, the Dutch law will change and the maximum inflation for the rental prices 6% or something.
yeah, it's a more reasonable rule. I think.
Yes.
But it's only if you live there. If they have new tenants, they can
for new tenants.
But is there anything within like the market, because everyone kind of says the market dictates whatever it is, and does the Dutch government set a cap on what the market can be regulated per neighborhoods? Because it almost seems like they have a catch of what each property value could be. There is
a point system for all rental properties below 752 euros.
But not above.
And then you can, not above, and there are current proposals now to pull that point system into whatever higher thing. Because right now, for example, if your rental property is 750 exactly, you have so many points in square meters, so many points in location, in bathrooms and other things, in the energy label that your house has. And then you add 1 square meter, and it's now 753 euros, so it's liberalized, then the owner can just say, okay,
and you know what the real problem is, whether it's Caracas or Athens, you take those 2 points, right? Is that a lot of housing was done in Athens in the 50s, the whole city was built by that. And Caracas also, right? The problem is the maintenance of all those buildings and assets, right? And the maintenance goes down. So what happens is rents go down, whatever, over time because they can't. So what the city's game really is not a price point. Is how does the city get to that its city stock is all well maintained for the good of the city.
Well, I've read the City as a Project essay on that, and I think that comes to an issue of do you kind of go in a libertarian way of allowing no rules and zoning, just put code to make sure that the infrastructure is safe for the individual or the family to live in the building, and allow people to dictate what they want to build on their own property. And another thing in the States is how do you have sole lots, or do you join them together where it might fluctuate your tax income base, basically, and property value. So I guess
that's an interesting question, because you would think that Amsterdam should have a historic zoning, right? Thinking that it's a historic city. But Rotterdam should have no zoning.
Should we continue the conversation?
Is that it? Sorry, Michel, I don't know if
No, I think we should talk about the rest later, because we need to get a sandwich, etc. You will tell us later. Eh? But the only thing with this is, I think for social housing, it used to be this tradition of the Netherlands and of Western Europe in general. Of course, it's quite unknown to the Americas, I guess. There's still a lot of instruments and policies that are in place and that are out there to be used to continue these policies, but they're not presently not being used, and it's not en vogue to press for the social values of housing. Which apparently, this different kind of value set, I think that is important to stress and not be, we're not in the Thatcher period anymore where like the hard numbers and where profits are always the only thing that matter, especially not in Rotterdam. So I think we should take our limits, set them aside and take the freedom to see what we can come up with using all these examples, and continue from there.
But what Michel said very important, and the cities here, if we can't get it into policy, it'll make no difference.
And not all of the policy can be made by the city. It's also done
By the
national government
citizens.
and European rules, so it's a mix.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and just to very last remark, I think it is necessary that we talk about affordable housing in this way, in a sort of planned way or collective way. Also because we need to take all these other things into account now, like the energy transition and climate adaptation, etc. So to take a libertarian approach is not doable. It's not doable. It calls for collectivization.
And we keep on saying housing, but it's also, what we kind of like about sometimes the squats is that suddenly you have also social activity within the housing. Should we talk only about monofunctional neighborhood where we say, okay, we have housing, as we saw in this image, because pure housing, but do you have a community center, do you have kindergarten, do you have shops, do you have activity? And we know that some models like Le Corbusier bars in Marseille, which is supposed to have like a butcher shop and a street on the sixth level. But to think about, this monofunction, I mean, I know we're talking about social housing, and we have this word and we keep on talking about it. The city is this heterogeneous, complex system, and we also have to be careful about those categorization. We say, okay, housing, the city is made up of housing and then of other things, but housing is a very important element, especially if it's combined with other elements, and I'm very worried when we keep talking only about monofunctional.
All the examples that we will see, and that I talked about, but all that we will see this afternoon are all about small villages within the city, collective parts. They are the projects that Le Corbusier looked at. So I'm sure you will be happy.